What is Vertcoin? Vertcoin is an open source, truly decentralized digital currency that can be sent from peer to peer over the internet. There are no intermediaries, no chargebacks, and most importantly, you control your money. Vertcoin is sent and received from a digital wallet on your mobile phone or PC. When you send Vertcoin, the transaction is published to a distributed public ledger, whereby users are incentivized to verify transactions with their computer processing power in return for a Vertcoin reward. Surprisingly, most transaction verification for leading cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, is not done by its users at all. It is handled almost entirely by large data centers called mining farms. These farms use specialized hardware called ASICs, which are primarily owned and operated by large mining companies and ASIC manufacturers. So why does it matter? ASICs centralize power in the hands of a few, allowing them to manipulate transaction fees, force protocol changes, and block others. Vertcoin foresaw the issues ASICs would bring and pledges to keep its mining algorithm ASIC resistant by hard forking if needed. By allowing users to profitably mine coins on home desktop PCs and laptops, Vertcoin stays true to the original vision of cryptocurrency, a financial system owned and run by its users. Visit vertcoin.org to get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to, this is not an episode of Vertcoin Talk. This is a episode of Vertcoin where we're going to be discussing Vertcoin Extras. Now, I did want to give a little warning. This is the first time that we've used Zoom with the new software that we're using for streaming here today. So unfortunately, right now my CPU is pegged out at 100%, so hopefully the user experience is not that bad. I know it will drop from some frames and stuff of that nature, but we did want to get Gert-Jaap here from the Netherlands. He's one of our developers, one of the kingpins of the Discord community. We wanted to get him on here to talk about his new project that he's kind of folding into Vertcoin called Vertcoin Extras. So Gert, just give us a brief synopsis on kind of what that is, and then we'll do a kind of a deep dive and start answering some questions.
Cool. Yeah, so in general, it stems from the idea that the Vertcoin the blockchain, the Vertcoin core software, you want it to contain everything that's critical to the consensus. So you want it to be able to synchronize blocks, transactions, and things like that. And obviously, the core software also includes a wallet, just to simply transfer coins from one to the other. But as we've seen, like in the recent history, that there's a bunch of new software applications that are building on top of that blockchain. So Lightning is obviously a prime example. So Lightning is simply building on the layer 1 blockchain by making special kinds of transactions on that blockchain and then trying to add features, and in the case of Lightning, that feature would be a very high transaction throughput and transaction speed. So there's a bunch of interesting things you can do with a blockchain that we don't necessarily want to integrate into our core wallet, because the more features you add to a single piece of software, the more complex it gets, the bigger the chances are that you're going to have some bugs. So it makes sense to sort of isolate these applications that use the blockchain into a separate project, and also into separate binaries or separate pieces of software. And as I started to look into some of the things you can do, and the first thing I looked into was the OpenAssets, and the second was the stealth transactions. So when you start looking at those, they share a lot of the necessary logic. Like if you want to build something on top of the base blockchain, you need some things in order to be able to work with those. And these components can be shared between these application level blockchain software. So then it makes sense to sort of combine this base layer with the applications, like drawing from the same library, essentially. And that's how I started with the OpenAssets, which was sort of a prototype. And then when trying to figure out the stealth transactions, I figured that there was a lot of shared code, and thus it made sense to sort of combine it into what I now call Vertcoin Extras. I'm not sure if that's the right name. It's obviously not. The marketing people haven't looked at it, but that's what made the most sense for now.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the name can adjust and things. Right now, we're kind of in alpha stage, right? We're testing this out. This is all on the testnet. We're trying to implement this into kind of a real world scenario, but we need to work out any bugs or anything of that nature. What do you think is a good use case for something like this? Say down the road, would a company or an individual use this? As opposed to I guess the standard stuff that they would use today. Like what would it replace?
Well, I mean, essentially, if you look at then we have to cover like the specific applications, right? So, like everything that a blockchain application uses is the fact that blockchain it delivers decentralized trust, right? So the basic application is money, like double spend protection. You want to be able to transfer digital goods from one person to the other without having to trust a third-party intermediary. And with the network's native asset being Vertcoin, that already works, right? So I can send you Vertcoin. I don't need to trust a third party. I can send it to you. But as we've seen in some other blockchains, there's ways for you to create your own asset on top of the same blockchain. So you use the same infrastructure. It just allows you to issue that asset and then, disperse it under population, send it to people. People can send it to each other. But you don't necessarily want to use Vertcoin for that. There might be a reason, and like ERC20s are obviously the most commonly known type of those assets. So people can issue ERC20 tokens on Ethereum very easily.
Yep.
And then the only thing necessary to transfer it from one person to the other is you have to pay the transaction fees of the network, which in case of Ethereum is in Ether, and in case of if you have a Vertcoin asset, you can transfer it to somebody else, and you have to pay Vertcoin transaction fees,
which are really small, right?
Which are extremely small because that's sort of a negative thing and a positive thing in once. I mean, for people that use it, it's very cheap. If for the broader outlook, the reason why it's cheap is because you're probably the only one using it at the same. So it has a good side and a bad side in that sense. But so you can create digital assets, and it can be any type of asset, and you can transfer it to somebody else. The only thing you pay is a little bit of Vertcoin in terms of transaction fees.
Okay. So
so I'm not 100% sure on the use case. Like I'm also not 100% on I know a previous use case of Ethereum ERC20 tokens, which was sort of fundraising. Okay. I don't expect that to even happen again on Ethereum, because it's clear that there's rules in terms of security offerings and things like that. So there's a lot of friction with the law if you're trying to use it for fundraising, because there's laws around fundraising. But I mean, for me, the reason to make it was I figured it would just be fun to make. That's the reason I do a lot of things. But I mean, you can essentially generate a new asset, transfer it to other people. You could use it for, I don't know, for tipping, or you could use it for, I mean, if you want to have a token for an event. So you have an event where you first have to buy tokens, and then you can spend the tokens to get beer or, I don't know, things like that. You could use it for that, probably.
So I remember talking with a high-end DJ out in LA, probably about middle of last year, talking about he wanted to run a complete music festival on cryptocurrency, and he loves Vertcoin and he loves a few other projects, but he really wanted to get this idea of running an entire music festival off of a cryptocurrency. This sounds kind of like something that would help facilitate that, right?
Yeah, so I mean the biggest benefit of like issuing your own token on the network, and like if there's no exchanges where your token trades, and probably the chance of that is 100%, then I mean the value is sort of fixed, right? It's one token for one token, whatever value you give to it.
Yeah.
And so like if you want to use an actual cryptocurrency to do events, like say you want to run an event and you want people to pay with Vertcoin, then at the gate they get, you know, $50 worth of Vertcoin, and then when they're buying beer at the end of the night, turns out that their money is already spent, even though they spent like $45, but the value just decreased by 10%.
Yeah.
Things like that happen. Like these assets are very volatile, and if you say, okay, I exchange $50 for 50 Vertcoin open asset like event tokens, then you're sure that you can spend 50 tokens. That's just the way it works.
Yeah. So it's just prepaying. You're prepaying for access to the event. I think that would be it's not a matter of this is the specific use case for this. It's another sandbox that allows you to utilize the blockchain in order to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. It's just another tool, right?
Right. It's another application on top of the blockchain itself. And I don't know. I mean, in general, I think we're still in the phase where blockchain is like a solution looking for a problem. So the more solutions you have, the bigger the chance that you find a problem.
Definitely. Now, one of the other things that is included kind of in Vertcoin assets or Vertcoin extras is the implementation of stealth transactions. So can you talk about that a little bit? And because I know a lot of people get really hyped over stealth and privacy and things of that nature in cryptocurrency, especially. How would this help facilitate any sort of privacy or stealth transactions?
Right. So I noticed that there's been discussions about stealth transaction for ages. And apparently it was something that was included in like the core wallet.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And so the thing is, it's not part of Bitcoin, right? So it's not in Bitcoin Core. I don't think it'll ever be in Bitcoin Core. And the reason is that you can, like the stealth transactions in itself, you can do without changing the consensus layer. Like you don't need to change anything to Bitcoin or Vertcoin in order to use stealth transactions, because they derive from a very interesting property of the underlying cryptography, and that is that if you generate two keys, so you have two private keys, you have a private key A and you have a private key B, they both have a corresponding public key. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows how that works, right? So you have a private key and you have a public key. Now the interesting thing about elliptic curve is that if you add the public keys together, the key that you get, its private key will be the private keys added together. So private key A plus private key B is private key C. If you convert that to a public key, you will get the exact same key if you would add public keys A and B together. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing you can do with that is a stealth transaction. So how a stealth transaction works is, instead of posting my regular Vertcoin address, which would be a hash of my public key, in order to protect my public key for some reason, I would publish the entire public key. But if you send, you can send something to a public key. Mm-hmm. And I cannot stop you from doing that, obviously. But the idea of the stealth address is that somebody uses that public key to add another key to it, using the mechanism I just tried to explain. And so I have my public key, I posted it somewhere, I say this is my stealth public key. And then if you want to send it money, you generate a one-time key. So you generate a new key that you're only going to use for this transaction. Mm-hmm. And then you get the public key that belongs to that private key, and then you add it to my address. So you get a new key. Now, in order to spend the money that you send to that key, you have to combine the two private keys. Now, one you generated, The other one I only have. I don't reveal it to anybody. That's still a private key.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you send money to the added address, then I need your key that you just generated and the key I already have that I kept private. And if I add those two together, I can spend the money. And so the interesting part, or like the only difficult part of this protocol, is that you have to find a way to get the key that you generated, and you have to send it to me. I have to get it some way, because otherwise I cannot spend it. And the way that this prototype does it is it encrypts the private key using my public key, which means I can decrypt it using my private key. And then I add the encrypted key to the transaction in an extra output. So there, like if you send me one Vertcoin, there's a one Vertcoin output to me, to the combined key. And then there's another output that just contains data. It contains bytes. And it will contain the encrypted key. And so what I do as a client is I look at the blockchain for these kinds of transactions. So I look for transactions that have two outputs, or three, because there's always change, but at least there's an output with data, and it starts with a fixed like 4 or 5 bytes of data. So if I recognize that, I'm going to try to decrypt whatever key comes after it. And if I succeed using my key, then it's an output meant for me. And then I save the combined key, and then once I'm ready to spend, I can spend it as like any other transaction. There was a lot of text, so I hope that was at least somewhat clear.
Oh yeah. I think if anything, I think that just opened people up to, that stealth addresses aren't necessarily easy. They're rather complex, and it kind of lets them understand how those go about and kind of what the value proposition is behind having those enabled on your system. So I just want to reiterate, like I said before, this is completely alpha stage. We're just doing testing, but we wanted to do this real quick just to kind of give you an understanding of our mindset as to why we're trying to implement this into the Vertcoin ecosphere, and then seeing kind of to get feedback from the community on what you would like to see, what you think you could use this for, because obviously we're just like you said, we're trying to create solutions to problems that don't necessarily exist right now, but it's a big sandbox, and we want to give you as many tools as possible to be able to utilize the blockchain and the whole Vertcoin ecosystem. So let me see if we have any questions here in the chat. I know that we had some people shilling XRP, saying that Vertcoin would never be adopted and XRP would be mass adopted. I guess if you're an accredited investor and you're okay with trading securities, you can do that. Let's see. No real questions with regards to the topic we have here today. Today we got a little bit lower of a count because we're not streaming at our normal time, and then I obviously didn't have time this morning to broadcast anything out. But if that's all we have today, we'll make it a quick and short one. This is just a quick overview of Vertcoin Extras. But do you have anything else that you wanted to throw out? Anything?
Yeah, I think I didn't cover one of your points. Is like how this actually provides any privacy.
Yes.
Because obviously, if you use a real privacy coin like I don't know, Monero or Zcash or the Grin, the new blockchain.
Yes.
That uses so like the idea of those blockchains is to actually hide where the money goes. So the only thing that you verify as a consensus participant is all the money that comes in is equal to the money that goes out. So there's nobody creating money out of nothing. But nobody is able, unless you're the sender or the recipient, or maybe even if you're only the recipient, can verify that you are the one that received money. So nobody can really account money to you. And the thing that stealth transactions adds is, if anyone has your public key, they can never relate multiple payments to you. So if I post out my stealth public key, nobody will be able to link all the payments that were sent to that same address. If I do that with my Vertcoin address, so if I post an address on the internet, people can just use a block explorer, look up the address, and then they see all the money coming in and all the money going out. If I reuse the same address, which you shouldn't do, but people do it anyway.
Yeah.
So in case of stealth transaction, if I post an address on the internet, there will never be, because it's technically impossible, there will never be a block explorer where you can put in that address and see who sent money to it. Because every time somebody sends it, it generates a new random address, combines that random address with my stealth address, and generates a new address. So anybody that sends stealth transactions to my stealth address will be sending it to a different address. And there's no way for a public observer to actually figure out which of the problem is that it doesn't look like an actual blockchain payment from one address to the other, because there's that weird output that contains the encrypted key. So right now you could be able to see which are all the stealth transactions, like all of them. But you could never figure out which one is sent to whom. That's impossible. Yeah. Unless you have the private key. So you have to have somebody. So if somebody confiscates your private key and then starts looking on the blockchain, like which payments are yours, yeah, they can see them. But I think they can see that with Monero as well. If they get your private key, they can see everything.
Yeah, that's the key, is you have to have that private key. Yeah.
Right. So it provides some privacy, but not the same level of privacy as the actual privacy coins that also hide the entire, their entire transaction history is hidden, right? So you cannot see a single transaction unless you have a key to that specific transaction.
Yeah.
So there's much more privacy there than there's here. But then again, I believe it's the same thing as the stealth transactions that we used to have. And so I think, it's a way to figure out if people actually use this, because that's another thing that I'm sort of worried about sometimes, is the fact that everybody has a lot of ideas, and that's fantastic. But sometimes things cost a lot of time to build, especially if you want to build it right. And these were sort of the reason that these are prototypes, and that I haven't spent much time since releasing it, because I feel that it should first get some pull from the market. Like, people should download this stuff, play with it, and then figure out that it doesn't work, or it does work, or that it's missing some things, before we actually invest a lot of time. And then, after spending a lot of time figuring out people not using it, that's a waste of everybody's time.
Exactly.
So I would encourage everybody to, download it. There's been 2 or 3 people that found some bugs, which is great. So we're looking at, I'm obviously going to look at those. And there's 2 more things, or one more thing, is that we're trying to see if we can also wrap this into a sort of one-stop shop. So the path from Vertcoin Extras is it's a separate executable already, but now you have to manually start Vertcoin Core, open up the RPC ports, and then make sure that it can connect. The only downside to that is it requires a lot of manual configuration. And what I could do, and what I'm looking at, is making the Vertcoin Extras, or whatever we're going to call it, start up the Vertcoin node as well, and then connect to it from the software, so that it sort of embeds, if you will, Vertcoin, the core software is just downloaded from the GitHub if you don't have it yet, and then start it up, and then we connect to it, which makes for a much smoother user experience, I think. We're also looking at how to freshen up the UI and things like that. So there's still a lot of things going on, but it's all still experimental. and I would invite everybody to try it out, see if it does what you expect it to do. Maybe it triggers some ideas about other things that we could do. So that's mainly why we put it out.
Yeah, so this is just a test case. We're just checking to see if the market actually wants this, because time is very valuable, and the fact that we're putting in a lot of time into a project voluntarily anyways, we want to make sure that whatever time we are putting in, that it's being put to good use, and it's actually going to be used by the community. So to get this, all you have to do is go to the GitHub for Gert-Jaap's. It's not on the regular Vertcoin one. It's on your own GitHub, right?
Not yet. Yeah, it's on my own GitHub. I mean, if it has any official status, then it will probably be moved to the Vertcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I did, I just posted a link to that in the chat here, so you guys can go there, click, run it. If you have any questions, if you want to know, if you have an idea about a way to use this or anything of that nature, please jump into our Discord, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. Or if you're running into any problems kind of setting it up, because you just said that it is more manually intensive right now. It's not as automated, but that may be somewhere that we go in the future as far as making it more automated. I know some other things that we're looking to do on the development side is combining into one piece of software for not only the core wallet but the miners, and trying to make it as user-friendly as possible for all of the users to be able to use and to kind of adopt this stuff into their day-to-day lives. Because really, at the end of the day, if you want to have kind of a mass adoption of being able to use Vertcoin as a payment for goods and services, you need to make it as user-friendly as possible. But that does take time, and we need to make sure that if we are going to invest time in that it's going to be worth it and it's actually going to be used by the community.
Right.
Yep. So, awesome. Well, I don't see any questions here, so we can go ahead and I think that covered all of the points we wanted to talk about today, I believe. If you guys have any other questions, by all means, just shoot us a message on Discord or any of our social channels or anything like that. But if that's all for today, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And thank you guys very much for tuning in, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye.